Hello, this is Dan Arth, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the Wednesday, March 4th issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the front page, I will not be running. Article by Ben Spur, Alicia Hashem, and Ben Cohen. John Tory shook up the Toronto mayoral race on Tuesday, but not in the way many had expected. After months of speculation that the politician who resigned abruptly from the city's highest office 3 years ago was planning a comeback bid this fall, and an acknowledgement from the man himself he was mulling a run, Tory announced he has decided not to enter the race. In a surprise statement, Tory said he was proud of his record as mayor and thanked all of those who have been urging me to run again. He acknowledged he gave another campaign serious consideration, but ultimately decided, I will not be running. His decision, first reported by the Star shortly before he made it official, reshapes what had been expected to be a heavyweight electoral bout this year between the current mayor and her predecessor, and potentially leaves the door open for another high-profile center-right challenger to take on progressive mayor Olivia Chow. Chow, who won the June 2023 by-election to replace Tory, has yet to announce her political intentions, but she's expected to contest the October 26th, 2026 vote. Councillor Brad Bradford, Beaches, East York, has already declared he intends to run. The 71-year-old Tory said he arrived at his choice not because he lacked the energy or the desire to seek office, but because of the toll a potentially punishing campaign would take on those close to him. I feel I cannot put my family and the people I care about through the inevitable attacks on me and my personal life that started to see before I've even announced my intentions, Tory said in his statement. The popular former chief magistrate quit just months into his third term in February 2023 after the Star revealed he had a relationship with a woman who had worked in his office. The city integrity commissioner later found that Tory broke ethics rules in his handling of his affair with the staffer, who was 31 when Tory quit. Speaking on News Talk 1010 on Tuesday, Tory said he still has a relationship with the woman. Although his statements didn't specify which attacks he was referring to amid rumors of his potential resurgence last year, left-wing advocacy group Progress 2 started posting hard-hitting ads about his affair. The group, which backed Chow in the last election, said in a post to its website that Tory had quit in disgrace over sexual misconduct with a young employee. It also compared him to former New York City Governor Andrew Cuomo, who stepped down in 2021 over sexual harassment allegations. Tory was never accused of harassment, and the Integrity Commissioner concluded his relationship with his staffer was consensual. This is a good news day, Progress 2 Executive Director Saman Tabasenjad said Tuesday. She said at one time Tory may have expected to coast to victory and that the Progress 2 campaign may well have played a role in his staying out. I think he was scared to run on his record, and we would have forced him to run on his record. Chow, for her part, thanked Tory for his many years of service. I know he loved the city, she told reporters in a brief scrum at an event Tuesday. Bradford, a former Tory ally who split with him in 2023 after he endorsed the councillor's rival in that year's by-election, said in a statement he had a lot of respect for John's decision. John Tory has given years of service to the city. I will always be grateful for the support he gave me when I first decided to run, Bradford said. The personal sacrifice that comes with public office is immense and is often overlooked. It is a massive challenge for the people closest to you, and they have to come first. Councilor John Burnside, Don Valley East, said he was disappointed by Tory's announcement. The pair were both first elected in 2014 and were close allies, and Burnside said he had been hoping to reunite with him at City Hall. The former mayor, Burnside said, had a vision for the city that extended beyond just solving the issues of today, namely congestion and housing. We need candidates who are well-rounded. That's what I saw in John Tory, he said. Toronto is just treading water. We need someone who can make it the world-class city that it could be. Confirmation that Tory won't seek to reclaim the mayoral follows many of reporting from the Star and others that he was considering a return from self-imposed political exile. In September, Tory told reporters at a gathering of former council members he was weighing a run, saying, "I do run into lots of people on the street who encourage me to get back into politics." Public opinion polls repeatedly showed he would give Chow a stiff contest. Daryl Bricker, CEO of polling firm Ipsos, said Tory's departure from the scene is a double-edged sword for Chow. While her greatest rival is out of the race, she'd likely been hoping for a crowded field running to her right. Bricker said he thinks Tory's absence does provide unambiguous benefit to Bradford. He's the mayor's most prominent challenger, for the time being at least, and will have an opportunity to get some more attention now and emerge as the consensus anti-Chow candidate. There's enough opposition to the direction of the city that somebody will try to be that, said Bricker. The question is, will it be Bradford, or does anybody else now see an opportunity? Nominations open May 1st. A lawyer and former leader of the Ontario PC Party, Tory was first elected on a promise to restore civility to City Hall after the scandal-plagued mayoralty of Premier Doug Ford's brother, Rob. In his more than 8 years in power, Tory governed from the center-right, mostly keeping property tax increases in line with inflation. He also helped advance major projects such as the controversial Scarborough subway extension and was praised for his steady leadership through the COVID-19 crisis. Critics said his tax policies starved the city of revenue needed to adequately fund city services, however, and he failed to complete signature initiatives such as his Smart Track transit plan and proposed rail deck park. Before the Star revealed his relationship, Tory had easily won re-election twice and was on track to become Toronto's longest-serving mayor. In a February 10, 2023 news conference that shocked the city, he described the affair as a serious error in judgment and said he was stepping down to reflect on my mistakes and to do the work of rebuilding the trust with my family. In his interview with News Talk, he suggested it was his family who talked him out of running again over fears it would be painful for them to have his affair relitigated in public. I think they were actually right, and I needed them perhaps to tell me that, to be perfectly honest, he said. He also suggested it was unfair of political opponents to attack him over his relationship because he had owned what happened by resigning, and a city ethics watchdog had already examined every aspect of it. In a 122-page report released in October 2023, then Integrity Commissioner Jonathan Batty found Tory breached council's code of conduct over the affair because he failed to follow guidelines that govern council members' dealings with their staff and exercised improper influence. The latter finding was related to Tory voting on city council items to advance Toronto's bid to host the 2026 FIFA World Cup after the woman he was in a relationship with had taken on a job at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment and was working on the soccer tournament. Despite Batty's findings, the commissioner recommended council not impose any penalty on the former mayor because he had already left office. While Tory said he is likely done with electoral politics, he said he plans to continue contributing to the city through his work with Wood Green Community Services, the Scarborough Health Network, and Toronto International Film Festival. Article from the news section. This pain is not new to Cuba, by Rosie DiMano. The United States and Israel are in pursuit of regime change in Iran, but U.S. President Donald Trump is alone in pursuit of regime change in Cuba. The island nation, a mere 145 kilometers from Florida, was once a thorn in the side of America, but is no longer much of an existential aggravation for Washington in the Western Hemisphere neighborhood. Hasn't been really since the disastrous CIA-sponsored Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban Missile Crisis a year later in 1962. Yet after upending Venezuela by kidnapping its leader, Nicolás Maduro, in January, Cuba is very much on Trump's mind, although obviously retreating amid expanding war-triggered chaos in the Middle East. Under a strict U.S. embargo dating back to 1962, Cuba found itself square in Trump's crosshairs, screws tightened when the president signed an executive order on January 29th pledging to impose tariffs on any country providing the country with oil amid what was already a deepening energy crisis. Trump tosses around tariffs like confetti while Cubans are suffering grievously. No oil, no fuel, 20-hour daily blackouts, critical shortages of food, water, and medicine. The last that Trump spoke about the targeted country was February 28th, when he raised the possibility with trailing reporters of a friendly takeover of Cuba. What in the world does that even mean in a country with a long history of wars of independence and fierce nationalism secured by revolution and bloodshed? Americans are a little ahistorical on Cuba, quite tone deaf on Cuban history, says Mark Entwistle, Canada's ambassador to Cuba in the 1990s, with 3 decades of intimate engagement with the country. This is like Back to the Future. Let's go back to a beautiful utopian time when we ran everything and we owned everything. If there's a principal theme of Cuban history over the past 120 years, it's sovereign independence. A bit of Cuba is unfinished business, a bit of American glory. Let's get back to the 1940s and 1950s when we ran the place and it was effectively a colony. Yes, they are in a horrific economic situation and a humanitarian crisis is looming. So they do have to put water in the wine, potentially. But I know them very well. Whoever sacrifices Cuban independence and sovereignty betrays Cuban history will not go down well in history. Those seeds will be planted for simply another cycle of Cuban nationalism, which is pretty inherently anti-American. It will always surface, said Entwistle. For most Americans, Cuba hardly registers, as poll after poll has shown, though a great many took the opportunity of visiting, as upwards of 1 million Canadians do annually during the fleeting quasi-normalizing of diplomatic relations under then U.S. President Barack Obama, who traveled there in 2016. His objective to bury the last remnants of the Cold War. In retrospect, it was a fever dream, as the U.S. subsequently reverted to a hard no-go containment. Americans need to be careful about what they're biting into here, continues Entwistle, a lifelong diplomat and now senior fellow at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. What do they even want if it is regime change, which they're now backing away from saying it's not really, but it is? The fundamental tenet of U.S. policy for decades has been regime change, and I don't see this as any different. So, okay, Get rid of them, then what do you do? You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. It would take billions and billions of government taxpayer dollars to transform Cuba into a free market economy that would make it attractive for investment by American companies. That's one way to lose a national election. I find it quite fantastical, the whole thing. Cuba is an issue of national politics, specific to the diaspora in Florida, near and dear to the heart of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, whose parents immigrated to the U.S. before he was born. It's been a tenet and pillar of his whole political career, spanning a couple of decades, observed Entwistle. I don't suspect Trump is particularly seized with it, except where it fits into broader American ambitions in the hemisphere. If he's been convinced that it does contribute to continuing to deliver the Cuban-American votes in South Florida, and if the argument can be made to him that he's shoring up that vote at a time when his overall approval ratings are teetering. There is, as well, Trump's national security strategy announced in December, basically in America First, corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, asserting its preeminence in the Western Hemisphere. Folded into that is Trump's view of traditional allies as a burden rather than an asset. The United States is positioning itself on the basis of a worldview that's 200 years old, says Entwistle. The hemisphere belongs to American interest. It's the Monroe Doctrine plus. From that perspective, Cuba is back on the table. Although more recently Trump did greenlight small shipments of Venezuelan oil if its delivery circumvents government hands, meaning it's directed to non-government entities and small businesses, which in practice is impossible. Canada, which has good relations with Cuba, could play a role if sanity gains traction, argues Entwistle, particularly by helping to strengthen the fledgling private sector. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we would have a great influence, but they're in a very rough place right now, and what they might respond to, rather than being throttled by the United States for all kinds of motives, some of which are quite self-serving and nefarious, they'd much rather talk to a country like Canada. Canadian efforts might mitigate the situation, ease it from immediate crisis to something more long-term manageable. But of course, Ottawa needs to simultaneously and carefully navigate its own relationship with Washington, especially in the context of CUSMA trade renegotiation. There is a younger generation of Cubans admittedly fed up with living in a world frozen in time and economic stagnation. They're tired of deprivation and sacrifice, says Entwistle. A generation that's now very disconnected and alienated from any of the narrative of Quebec's historic arch. They've had it. They want these guys to go. They'd be quite happy to have a McDonald's around the corner. Nevertheless, says Entwistle, Trump has underestimated resistance and resilience, particularly among an older generation with firsthand memory of the struggles. They're equally tired, but they still were brought up in an era where they were imbued with the basic ideas and ideals of Canada nationalism. Will Cuba break under such straitened pressure? It's legitimate to assume they don't have very long before the lights really go out. The Cubans, though, are consummate survivalists. Article from Sports, Maple Leafs, a season beyond repair. Leafs head into final stretch as playoff outsiders and deadline sellers. Article by Kevin McGran, sports reporter. The Maple Leafs season started with such promise. Blue Jays star Vladimir Guerrero Jr., possibly the most popular athlete in Toronto in October, wore an Austin Matthews jersey to a World Series game. Leafs fans cheered, "Let's go Blue Jays," because the vibe in the city was so great. They wanted to pass it on to their hockey team. Now if fans cheer, "Let's go Blue Jays," It's in derision, an acknowledgement the Leafs' season is in total disarray. Departures and injuries, missed moments and blown leads, bad power plays and poor goaltending. So many poor starts. Coach Greg Berube used his timeouts early to give an earful to his team. They all add up as we look at how this season got so far off the rails. Here, a sign. There were omens of the season going awry in training camp. Joseph Woll's mystery disappearance after 2 days set in motion all kinds of goaltending maneuvering. James Reimer, Caden, Primo, anybody it seemed but Dennis Hildeby, who never really got a chance until Anthony Stolarz got hurt in November. If there's a bright side, it's that Hildeby looks like a keeper. An injury to Scott Lawton ruined the fourth-line chemistry that was being built with Steven Lorentz and Easton Cowan. And the fact the team dumped David Kampf, a popular teammate, was unnerving. The team might have thought it had more depth than it really did. The Leafs went 2-2 in the preseason, but the 2 wins came with a lineup of hungry prospects. The 2 regulation losses came with something close to the Leafs' A team. The Stolarz start and stop. The veteran goalie signed a 4-year, $15 million USD extension on September 28th, committing to the Leafs for his first real, if moderate, payday. He had been one of GM Brad Treliving's best moves, offering stellar goaltending and making up for the team's mistakes in 2024-2025. He had emerged as a leader, a voice, but he said too much one night, 6 games into the season. The Kraken beat the Leafs in overtime, and Stolarz called out the team for letting Seattle get into his crease. He called out William Nylander in particular for a lazy backcheck on Seattle's winning goal. But Stolarz had his own problems. He allowed 27 goals over his next 8 starts, a 4.05 goals against average, and .876 save percentage. He was overused, and then he got hurt, missing the next 33 games. It wasn't all his fault. The Leafs were playing a slow, uninspiring brand of hockey. The injuries pile up. Chris Tanev was the true grit of the 2024-2025 team, an integral part of its physicality and toughness, a leader who would do anything to win. He has played just 11 games in 2025-2026. He suffered a head injury October 21st, came back for 1 game and suffered another head injury November 1st. He came back one more time, managed to get into 3 games before another injury, this time to his lower body. The Leafs were also without Brandon Carlo for 23 games due to an infection. They were without Austin Matthews for 5 games. William Nylander missed 17. Every team suffers injuries, but these were important players that were out. 2 steps forward. The Leafs claimed Troy Stecher off waivers, a serviceable right-handed defenseman who played above his pay grade from the moment he joined the lineup. The Leafs were tied with Buffalo for last in the Atlantic Division at the time, but they were only 4 points out of a wild card spot. They went on a 7-3-3 run from mid-November to mid-December, but barely gained in the standings. They were still 3 points out of a playoff spot. Then winnable games started becoming losses. The power play was abominable, held without a goal in 24 of 36 games. There were calls for Berube's firing. Instead, it was power play coach Mark Savard who walked the plank, replaced by Steve Sullivan. 10-game turnaround. There was a positive run on the way. The Leafs beat Pittsburgh 2 days before Christmas, backed by a power play that had come alive, and went on an 8-0-2 run that culminated with a 4-3 overtime win in Colorado. When they woke up the morning of January 13th, they had 53 points in 45 games and were in the first wild card position, their highest position since being in third place 14 games into the season. What happens in Vegas? The Leafs looked like they were back. Even a loss in Utah was excusable. Then came a date with Mitch Marner and a chance to exercise some demons. The Leafs were in seeming control, up 5-3 midway through the third period. They lost 6-5 in overtime. It brought memories of the Phil Kessel era, blown leads and 18-wheelers going off cliffs. The Leafs were listless in the return engagement in Toronto, a 6-3 loss. It seemed beyond this team's ability to rise to a big moment. The Leafs were frittering away the season on a night when Daryl Sittler was feted for his 10-point night 50 years ago. The Leafs offered up a dud, a 7-4 loss to the Buffalo Sabres, and they have been flat coming out of the Olympic break, playing some of their worst hockey since Game 7 against Florida in the second round of the playoffs last year. They have been out of their depth. They are out of the playoffs, and with the trade deadline coming Friday, the roster is out of time. Article from Sports. Raptors. Cursed streak continues. Raptors fall to another elite team as losing skid against the Knicks extends to 12. Article by Doug Smith, sports reporter. The Raptors welcomed the challenge of playing one of the NBA's elite teams. I feel awesome about that, Coach Darko Rakovic said early Tuesday evening, but someone might have added a codicil to that. Be careful of what you wish for. Despite putting up one of their best showings against a top NBA team this season, the Raptors took another loss at Scotia Arena on Tuesday night. The New York Knicks, who have beaten Toronto 12 times in a row and 3 times this season, pulled away for a 111-95 victory that wasted what at times was a top-level effort by the Raptors. A 16-2 Knicks run in the final 4:43 of the fourth quarter ended any hopes of a Raptors win and knocked Toronto down to 35-26 on the season and a miserable 16-16 at home. We couldn't really get our offense going the way we wanted to in the last couple of minutes, get the shots that we wanted most of the possessions. Jakob Poeltl said, it's another learning experience for us to be better in those situations. They're a team that has playoff experience and stuff. I feel like we're getting there, but we're obviously not on that level yet. The loss will give Rakovic and his staff many teaching points. It will give the players lessons to chew on, and it will underscore the lengths the Raptors still have to go. Rakovic's point should be well taken, though. The Raptors are on the ascent, but the growth from bad to very good does not come quickly or without bumps. And all the struggles against upper echelon teams will, they hope, pay off in the near future. I think that we as an organization made significant strides this season, Rakovic said before the game. For us, the next step is playing at a high level against the best teams in the league. We had games that were very, very competitive. Some of the games went our way. Some of the games did not. All of those games are amazing for us. Amazing with a pinch of realism tossed in. The Knicks are deeper, more experienced, and time-tested, and they seldom get out of sorts for any stretch of time in a game. The Raptors, to their credit, kept going at them to close double-figure deficits for about the last 3 quarters, but every time Toronto got close, the Knicks made a defensive play or a tough basket. I'm so excited to play against the best teams in the league, Rakovic had said. There is always learning for us, the competitive spirit we want to bring and find a way to beat those guys. The fact they haven't found it will sting until the Raptors get another shot at one of the league's top teams. Brandon Ingram had 31 points, and R.J. Barrett added 20 for the Raptors, who were within 2 points with about 5 minutes to go. Jalen Brunson with 26 and Karl Anthony Towns with 21 led New York. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. It took 8 seconds of the first quarter and a couple of hard bumps for Barnes to pick up a personal foul for colliding with Brunson. About 45 seconds after Barnes went out, Jamil Sheed took over and fouled Brunson on the first possession he played. If the Raptors were going to go hard at the Knicks, they were going to go hard at New York's best player. But while Brunson wasn't brilliant, his 26 points came on 22 shots, and he had 10 assists. It was hard for the Raptors to sustain the court-length physical defense they threw at him. Barnes had 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 1 assist, while Sheed had 4 points and 3 assists in his 24 minutes. The little things. The Raptors are not good enough to survive many mental mistakes in close games or against top echelon opponents. They hit the double daily of brain cramps against the Knicks. In the second quarter, after being forced to call a timeout when the offense bogged down and no one cut to open space, the Raptors came out of the timeout and committed a 5-second violation to turn the ball over. It led to an 11-0 Knicks run. Late in the third quarter, when they had carved a 10-point deficit down to 2, they were deflated by a Brunson three-pointer and walked the ball up the court so slowly they were nailed with an 8-second half-court violation. They were just 2 plays, but plays that mentally sharp, good teams don't make. Article from the business section, Financial Strain Eating into Canadians' Diets. Article by Amarachi Amadike. Survey shows people are skipping meals and using credit as rising food costs squeeze household budgets. More Canadians are relying on credit to put food on the table and sacrificing nutrition in the process, according to a new survey that shows how the strain of Canada's affordability crisis is increasingly surfacing in grocery aisles. A new survey from insolvency and debt relief firm Spergel finds that a majority of the 269 Canadians questioned said they had skipped meals or reduced portion sizes in the past 6 months due to financial pressure. 53% of the respondents who were between the ages of 30 and 60 reported using credit, buy now, pay later services, lines of credit, or payday loans to purchase groceries in the last 6 months. 2 in 5 respondents, 46% of which were from Ontario, said they had delayed paying another bill so they could afford food. In my 20 years of doing this, I never thought I'd see the day that food would be the thing that people are struggling with, said Rob Kilner, partner and insolvency trustee at Spergel. That's something we never had seen before. There's something fundamentally wrong when we have to rely on credit just to survive. The strain is also reshaping what Canadians are buying. Nearly half of respondents said they were purchasing less meat or protein, while 44.2% reported buying fewer fruits and vegetables. If you can't afford or eating healthy has become extremely expensive, said Kilner. He noted that the implications extend beyond household budgets. If you can't afford basic living, then there goes your health, he said. And if you have health problems, then you're a bigger strain on the medical system, which means more costs for Canadians. Though the federal government introduced a grocery rebate earlier this year, Kilner argues it has not meaningfully addressed price pressures as rebates alone don't resolve why groceries remain expensive. According to Sylvain Charbois, a Canadian food economist and professor at Dalhousie University, the answer lies in how the market itself is structured. While many Canadians accuse grocers of price gouging, Charbois argues the data does not support the claim. The gouging accusations are unfounded because you only need to look at gross margins to understand. Gross margins aren't moving, he explained, referencing profit margins that typically float around 2 to 4%. And so it's hard to accuse them of gouging consumers. Instead, he says competition is the core issue in Canada's concentrated grocery sector. As of 2026, Canada's grocery sector has a valuation of more than $121 billion, with the top 5 players, Loblaws, Sobeys, Metro, Walmart, and Costco, controlling 80% of the market. With more options comes more competition, and with more competition, you typically get lower prices, he said. He also points to property controls as a structural barrier. Large grocers, he notes, sometimes use lease agreements that prevent competing food retailers from the same plaza or nearby. This limits competition around their own store, Charbois said. It's a real problem, but the power imbalance extends beyond storefronts. Before a product even reaches shelves, manufacturers often face listing fees to secure placement, sliding fees for premium shelf space, or additional charges to appear in flyers or promotions. Refusing those terms can mean not being stocked at all. Though the recently implemented Canadian Grocery Industry Code of Conduct aims to make dealings between grocers and suppliers fairer, it doesn't address the structural pressures that keep pricing high. Manufacturers have no other choice but to deal with major grocers, Charbois said, adding that fee increases and commercial pressures can ripple through the supply chain, and that's all led by grocers. A spokesperson from Metro, Canada's third largest grocer, told the Star that it does not comment on the individual financial situations of its customers, including issues of debt or credit use, adding that the rising cost of living is putting pressure on more households as food insecurity becomes a bigger societal concern. Our teams are continuing their efforts to offer affordable options, said Metro Vice President of Public Affairs and Communications, Marie-Claude Bacon. She added that the increasingly complex economic conditions are changing Canadians' grocery shopping habits. In general, we are seeing increased price sensitivity, a marked interest in promotions, and a search for economical solutions, particularly through private labels and our discount banners, she said. Such demand for economical solutions has increased traffic toward grocery apps like Savor, a Niagara-based grocery price comparison platform. People have no brand loyalty anymore, whether to a retailer or specific products, said David D'Agostino, co-founder of Savor. Canadians are having to work harder to stretch their dollars. They're comparing product brands and stores more than ever to get the best total price. With his business partner Peter Bartist, D'Agostino created Savor to allow users to enter their grocery list and see prices for each item across multiple stores, making it easy to identify the best deals or figure out which store offers the lowest total cost. In December, for example, a list including pastas, rice, spinach, and produce showed a $16.86 price gap between a discount leader store versus a traditional big box competitor. That's a 30% markup just for convenience, D'Agostino told the Star. though he emphasized that there's an increasing appetite for apps that cut grocery costs in Canadian households. Such innovations do little to change the broader market forces shaping Canada's inflated food prices. Article: Business Retail. Target investing $2 billion in bid to boost sales. Article by Ann DiNocenzio. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Target is investing another US $2 billion in its business this year to spruce up and remodel stores, among other projects, as it tries to turn around a persistent sales malaise and reclaim its authority on style. The investment, announced Tuesday at its annual investor meeting at its headquarters in Minneapolis, comes as the discounter reported another quarter of declining sales and profits amid its struggles to regain its footing with customers who are going elsewhere for fashion, home, and other needs. Tuesday's report offered some hope for the business. The company delivered a solid annual profit outlook that was better than Wall Street had been projecting. It also said it believes net sales will grow every quarter this year. Target said comparable store sales rose to start the current quarter. This is a new chapter and it's all about growth, said CEO Michael Fiddelke, a 20-year company veteran who succeeded longtime CEO Brian Cornell last month. Fiddelke and other executives detailed plans to turn around Target as investors have been hungry for a return to Target's former dominance in affordable chic, for which it earned it the nickname Target in years past. Target said that its stores will get the biggest refresh this year than they have had in roughly a decade. The company will invest hundreds of millions of dollars for additional store labor and training, and it plans to open 30 new stores and aims to remodel 130 of its existing stores. In particular, Target is launching a new beauty area called Target Beauty Studio in 600 stores this fall, which will offer upscale beauty products and beauty services. The new area will partly replace its shops with Ulta, which is ending its partnership in August, the company said. Fiddelke takes over with Target's hometown of Minneapolis, a front line of sorts in U.S. President Donald Trump's campaign to curb illegal immigration. Some of the company's stores have become a flashpoint in a pushback against U.S. immigration and customs enforcement. The company has faced pressure to take a public stand against the immigration crackdown, and Target customers have soured on what they see as untended and messy stores with lackluster merchandise, as the company's nearly 2,000 store locations have become shipping hubs for online operations. Customers say the in-store shopping experience has suffered, with staff fulfilling digital orders rather than tending to store aisles. Target is also facing stiffer competition from Walmart, which has stepped up its focus on fashion and other goods. Article from the business section: Rise of GLP-1 drugs reshaping eating and spending habits. Study looks at change in food, clothing purchases among Canadian users. Article by Nicole Ireland. A new survey suggests about 3 million Canadian adults are currently taking GLP-1 drugs, such as Ozempic or Mounjaro, and many more would like to, but cost is a barrier. The poll conducted by Leaguer Healthcare says more than half of the people surveyed who are taking the medications reported decreased appetite, and 40% said they have fewer food cravings. Leaguer Healthcare says those effects are reshaping how GLP-1 users are spending their money, with about 30% going to restaurants or getting takeout food less often. The survey, released Tuesday, says about a third of them are buying more fresh fruits and vegetables, as well as protein-rich foods. It says weight loss is the number one reason people are taking or considering taking GLP-1 medications, followed by diabetes. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The survey released Tuesday says about a third of them are buying more fresh fruits and vegetables as well as protein-rich foods. It says weight loss is the number one reason people are taking or considering taking GLP medications, followed by diabetes. More than half of people interested in taking the medication said having insurance coverage or lower cost generic options would affect their decision. GLP-1s are no longer a niche health topic. They are a mainstream consumer in healthcare story. Millicent Lavers-Sally, Vice President of Research at Liger Healthcare, said, what the research found is the impact of GLP-1s is showing up in shopping baskets and behaviors, not just prescriptions. In addition to not going to restaurants as often, about 35% of people taking the medications said they order smaller portions than they used to, choose lighter or healthier options, or don't finish their whole meal. 36% said they have decreased their alcohol consumption. GLP-1 use is also changing what people buy outside of the grocery store, the survey said, with increased spending on clothes, personal care products, beauty service, and fitness. The survey findings also estimate that about 2 million Canadian adults are not taking the medications but would like to, although lack of insurance coverage and cost were barriers for about half of respondents interested in taking GLP-1s. Another 36% said they would take the medication if the risk of side effects was lower. Some people experience gastrointestinal side effects, including nausea, vomiting, constipation, and diarrhea. More severe complications can include gallbladder inflammation and pancreatitis, but most side effects are minor, doctors say. 58% of people taking or considering taking GLP-1 drugs said weight loss was their main driver, while 42% said diabetes was their primary reason. 22% said they wanted to take a GLP-1 for their heart health. Men were more likely to cite this reason than women. The survey found a quarter of the respondents taking GLP-1 medications were paying for the drugs out of pocket. The medication was fully covered by either private or public insurance plans for 28% of them. Almost half said they had partial insurance coverage. Liger Healthcare conducted the online survey with 1,536 Canadians aged 18 and over from February 6th through the 9th. 8% of the respondents said they were taking a prescription GLP-1 medication. Using 2025 adult population statistics, Liger Healthcare extrapolated that would equal about 3 million Canadian adults. Similarly, 6% of respondents said they were interested in taking a GLP-1 but weren't. The researchers extrapolated that would translate to more than 2 million Canadian adults. The polling industry's professional body, the Canadian Research Insights Council, says online surveys cannot be assigned a margin of error because they do not randomly sample the population. From the culture section, the Guess Who adding U.S. tour dates. Founding members Bachman Cummings return to America after 20 years. Article by Mark Kennedy. The principal songwriters of the Guess Who, the band that crafted the hit song American Woman, will tour America itself later this year for the first time in more than 2 decades. Original guitarist Randy Bachman and singer-keyboardist Burton Cummings, who have already announced a tour of their native Canada this summer, are adding more than 20 U.S. dates, they tell the Associated Press. Randy and I are getting this incredible welcome back feeling, says Cummings. It's magic to play the hit records and see people singing along after decades and decades. The Guess Who will cross the border starting June 25th in Minneapolis and hit such cities as Cincinnati, Chicago, Detroit, Atlantic City, Boston, Atlanta, Houston, Denver, Salt Lake City, Phoenix, Los Angeles, and Seattle. The last time Bachman and Cummings toured the U.S. as the Guess Who was in 2001 alongside Joe Cocker. Part of the delay in returning stemmed from a trademark dispute with their former bandmates who used the Guess Who name. A settlement was reached in September 2024, giving Bachman and Cummings the trademark. I'm glad that's all over with, said Cummings. Now we can go out and honor the songs. We're going out to honor the music. The Guess Who are one of the biggest classic rock acts to emerge from Canada, scoring memorable hits during the 60s and 70s like These Eyes, Hand Me Down World, Laughing, No Time, and Share the Land. The Guess Who became the first Canadian band to hit number one on the Billboard Hot 100. Bachman and Cummings promise a summer set list of some 20 songs that includes all the hits, and they'll play them exactly like they were played on the records. That's what people want to hear, says Bachman. When I go see my buddy Neil Young, I don't want the songs he wrote last week. Cummings agrees, comparing great songs to signposts in people's lives. I can remember the first time I heard Elvis on the radio, the first time I heard the Beatles, first time when I heard Ray Charles sing What I Say. He says, really great records never leave people's memories. They're there for good. Bachman and Cummings say there's a yearning for classic rock songs played live, especially in this age of AI and music writing software. Anybody can now write a song, put it in a computer, and a song comes out, but they can't play it live, says Bachman. The people want to see you playing real rock. They want to hear a mistake. They want to see a string break. Article from the opinion section. Time for big companies to buy Canadian. Article by Janice Kennedy. A year into the trade war the United States declared on Canada, here's a glimpse of a random Canadian shopper at the supermarket. She's walking past the Starbucks coffee she likes and picking up a bag from a Canadian roaster, even though it costs more. She's passing on the cheaper California lettuce in favor of produce from Canadian greenhouses. She hasn't even glanced at the Florida orange juice, a former breakfast staple, because Canadian apple juice now takes its place. These small gestures and those of millions of other Canadians in the daily marketplace are part of the war effort, intentional contributions made by ordinary Canadians. But now about Canadians on the corporate side of things. For too many, life still resembles the benign, borderless days of 2024. Consider advertising and, for example, BMO, Canada's first bank, as its tag used to announce proudly, has featured Lamorne Morris as the engaging face of its TV ad campaigns for 7 years now. He is an American actor. This is reminiscent of the amusing ad Canadian telecom giant Rogers aired a couple of years ago, featuring American actor John Krasinski solo dancing on a boat. The company later corrected course with a campaign featuring Canadian Keanu Reeves. Although for non-TV imagery, Rogers' ad agency still uses stock photos from American sources. Shutterstock and Getty Images, two companies currently merging into a single image powerhouse, do have branches in Canada, but are headquartered in the U.S. They offer a bottomless supply of stock photos, eliminating the hassle of local photo shoots with local models. Agencies here use Getty or Shutterstock to advertise everything from dental offices to retirement homes. So, ad agencies shouldn't have to worry about where they source their talent unless the Canadian company that hires them thinks otherwise. Unless that company understands that good public relations during this fraught national time might involve having Canadian faces. But the indifference to our trade war effort is not just in advertising. Canada's Department of National Defence may be planning to shift vast amounts of spending to the home front, but Revenue Canada is not. Tax season is upon us, and the two giants on the tax scene with channels straight into our revenue agency are non-Canadian. Intuit's TurboTax and H&R Block, which handle vast quantities of Canadian-sensitive personal information, are both independently Canadian branches of larger companies, but they are branches, subsidiaries of parent companies headquartered in the U.S. and therefore subject to American oversight. We're all feeling a little battered these days, especially after gold medal hockey games burdened with an excess of impassioned hope. The results were heartbreaking, but the official presidential posts, an American eagle atop a Canada goose, and AI Donald Trump figure pounding a Team Canada player, were jaw-dropping. Such a small man in such big, ill-fitting shoes. Yes, we're pretty sensitive right now. We're also exhausted. A little over a year into this relentlessly anti-Canadian administration, and we're bushed. Our firm resolve might even be softening a little. Winter-weary Canadians might be starting to wonder if a quick trip to sunny U.S. climes would really be a betrayal. Shoppers might be getting tired of foregoing the Florida orange juice and made-in-USA essentials. Canadians might be tempted to crack, recognizing that an Americanized marketplace here is inescapable, energetic resistance notwithstanding. Given our reliance on Google, Apple, Amazon, MasterCard, and Visa, that stars and striped elephant in our room looks immovable, although the European Union may offer some inspiration as it explores alternatives to Visa and MasterCard. But none of that means we should surrender. For as long as this absurd trade war lasts, first choice, wherever possible, should be Canadian talent, agencies, and products. Any reduction of dependence on the U.S., no matter how small, remains significant. So does any support, no matter how small, of Canadian companies. So it may be time to remind some of those Canadian companies who their customers are. We are Canadians are. Across the country, ordinary people have been making financial sacrifices, searching for alternatives, and upending habits of a lifetime, all to support Canadian businesses and institutions. It hasn't been easy, but we're doing everything we can. Those institutions and businesses we're supporting might consider doing the same. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star, Wednesday, March 4th issue. Your reader has been Dan Arth. Thank you for listening.